Last up, though, let's talk about channel crossings, because the backdrop of so many of our conversations throughout the last year has been the extraordinary number of people that are arriving here on our shores every single day on those channel migrant boats. And extraordinary figures for the month of July, as we hit the 2nd of August today, have shown that 3,683 people made that journey on 90 boats in, wait for it, July. Not this year, over 6 months. In 1 month alone, almost 3,700 people. Those, by the way, are just the ones we know about. But the number of migrants was the highest month of the year so far. And this comes amid reports that the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is looking to sign another deal costing us millions and millions of pounds with France to try and cut those numbers. Well, let's talk about that with Stephen Woolfe. He's the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Good morning to you once again, Stephen.
Good morning, Julia.
Another day, another week, another month, more migrants arrive. I mean, some of the footage that we see from the South Coast, it is just extraordinary. The huge number, largely young, healthy, able-bodied men travelling without women or children, arriving on our shores, costing us an absolute fortune. And doesn't matter what gets announced, Rwanda policies or deals with France, we don't seem to have the ability to stop it.
No, and I think the public has grown weary and more than frustrated at the inability of our border force to turn back those migrants in the middle of the channel. Their frustrations with the French, who consistently say their coastline is too large and we won't address the issue in the water, we'll only do it on the land. The amounts of money that we give to the French to actually effectively do very little. The European Union that is failing to prevent people crossing the borders from country to country because they know where they're heading to and they'd rather have them in Britain than in Europe. And of course, our own government that is failing to be able to tackle the immigration industry that is so strong, consistently supported by their political backers in allowing more and more people to come across.
Well, this is it. And we know that both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, the two people vying to become our next Prime Minister, both said they backed this Rwanda scheme. We still don't know. And is it at the end of this month we might hear whether or not the courts are going to allow those flights to ever take off? We know that Rwanda only contracted to take up 200 channel migrants to be processed and possibly staying in Rwanda for asylum. But we seem to be once again in a stalemate on this situation.
We are, and whilst we are in a stalemate, the people smugglers are taking advantage of this to use the great summer weather that we're having at the moment and the calmer waters to push more and more across, and that's what we're seeing. Look, there was 1,000 in one day. The estimates that we've said about the end of the year being 60,000 are looking very accurate at the moment, and if not, maybe an underestimate of the numbers that will come by the end of the year. As I've mentioned many times on the show, Julia, the cost to each individual coming across is £40,000 a year for each individual. That's huge sums of money. We have to be able to prevent this, and there has to be more radical solutions than simply the Rwanda policy. And we need to make sure that the courts are dealing with this as quickly as possible, even though we're in a summer recess.
I keep wondering if the French coastline is so difficult for the French to police, why we can't just pick these guys up, they are largely guys, and we just ship them back to the beach in France, carry them off if necessary. There you go. You just paid £5,000 to a people smuggler or whatever it is to come to the UK. You're back on a French beach. Come and have a go next week when you saved up some more money or got some more money sent from your village in wherever. And then we'll just bring you back again. It's an absolute waste of your time. I mean, it seems to me that, I know that human rights lawyers would say that was illegal, but it seems to me it's not like you're taking them back to some sort of hellhole. You're taking them back to France. I'm going there on Friday. It's not a bad place to be.
It's not certainly not illegal. The law of the sea, SOLAS, indicates that if people are being used by illegal means, such as people smugglers, then you can return them to the place. The big difficulty is the diplomatic issue, and a huge issue it would be, between the French government and the British government. And I would suggest that if I was the Home Secretary, this is about time you actually enforce this, because the French don't recognise this particular law, and they said that would need to go to the court. So let's do it. And the second big issue is dealing with our own Navy, and Border Agency who refused to do it. I mean, who are they representing? The people smugglers? Because that's certainly what it seems to be. Or those in the legal industry that would say that they would sue them if doing so. This is a lack of strength in the people running that organisation and cowardice on their part. So they should actually do it.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much for joining us, as always. Stephen Woolfe, Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. We bring in Benedict Spence, who's in the studio on this. This doesn't actually make front pages very often, and it often isn't on a lot of the media. The BBC have got various different sections on their most read, in their website, and it's coronavirus and it's climate change, very, very, very big issue. War in Ukraine. They finally managed to put, I think last week, cost of living as one of the options. They finally realised that was one of the big options. No doubt at some point they'll recognise that there's a crisis in the NHS as well, maybe more so than there is in the climate. But they don't recognise this as a story. This just, unless it's particularly on the front page, and it's only ever about, it's a tragedy if someone does die in the Channel, etc. But they don't recognise it as a legitimate concern for law-abiding citizens in this country, that there are thousands upon thousands of foreign young men arriving in this country. We don't know who they are or where they're from, and they're just coming, and we're doing nothing about it.
The key thing that has prompted the uptick, the increase, is actually, this is related to an earlier story, it's the collapse of the government in Afghanistan. Over half of the people now coming are coming from Afghanistan. That needs to be said. And whilst, yes, we have a duty to people who, have to flee the Taliban, because that's very much on us. What the government in this country needs to recognise, and what everybody needs to recognise, is the more crises that we have around the world will lead to increases in this. If there is a war in North Africa or East Africa, there will be more people coming. Another war in Iraq, as looks very likely, would see more people coming. And it's at what point, actually, do you say this is too many? Is it 5,000 people a week? Is it 6,000 people? Because these numbers have doubled, more than doubled, in the last year. So it's more than likely that one conflict could do it again.
Sort of dictators around, Gaddafi in Libya and elsewhere, and you say Saddam Hussein in Iraq, as they get deposed, you lose that grip. And one of the reasons why, for instance, the Americans prop up governments like the Saudis is because, the alternative, they feel, is much worse. But this is the thing, isn't it? When America withdraws itself, as it did, and love President Obama, would have voted for him, but he was an absolutely dire president when it came to foreign policy. When you withdraw from the world stage and then you leave a vacuum for Russia and China, as they happily did, to step in, you also, you allow these crises, Iraq was a terrible crisis. Well, how's Syria working out for everybody, And Afghanistan, as you say again, Taliban taking over, how's that working out for everyone? You allow this, this black hole, in this vacuum into which these organisations come. And as you say, I can see a point when Europe effectively is going to just build its own wall.
Well, this is the point, isn't it? That we've invited lots of people and we've said, yes, there's plenty of space, come along. At what point do you then say, oh, actually, no, we can't handle this? Because we're not actually building the infrastructure in our countries in the West to keep up with our own populations, let alone bringing in millions of refugees.
And you're saying, what's the number? Is it 5,600? It's, when you look at what happened after Syria in 2015, the Germans took more than 1 million people.
Well, the Danes took hundreds of thousands, have now faced a really difficult situation where they want to deport them because they've got too many.
And the Swedes as well.
And they've said to those people, it's safe to go back to Syria, but they legally can't deport them because they still don't recognise the Assad government. You leave yourselves in really difficult legal positions where you've got all of these people that you've said, yes, come away, that's a murderous dictatorship. Oh, we can't have you anymore, but we're kind of hamstrung.
Do you know what I really object to is this idea that, we're so lucky, we live in the West and we've got all these wonderful things, we've got these freedoms and the like. It's not luck. It didn't just happen. People fought for these. Small matter of world wars, people. Small matter of, people, like women's rights, suffragettes and civil rights movements in America. These countries and these values and these freedoms and these economic successes have been created by generation after generation of people committing to these things and compromising at election time and all of, these things happen over centuries in some cases. We're not just lucky. We might be lucky that we've been born here, but we're not just that Europe and America and Canada aren't just lucky.
We're not just lucky, but we're fortunate in that in some cases the right side won the various wars. We've had wars in Europe where awful ideologies have come to power and been deposed, whereas in other parts of the world they've not been so lucky. I think the Arab Spring is a good example of that, where people were deposed and not always replaced with better options.
Exactly. Well, I think pretty much not at all. I think we can say other than maybe Tunisia. I don't know.
Tunisia's all right, I suppose.
Possibly, yeah. 7:42 is the time.